Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a mental health condition that can develop after witnessing traumatic events. Emergency responders like police are at higher risk.
Ahead of World Mental Health Day this week, our correspondent Addison explores the scale of the issue in Britain and a warning that this report contains reference to suicide.
Brutal murders, suicides, fatal road collisions and abuse. UK policing isn't just a job, it's a front row seat to trauma, and for many officers the mental toll is devastating. I sent freedom of information requests to all forces to try to uncover the facts on how they manage trauma among their officers. I asked how many officers took sick leave for mental health reasons in the last 5 years. While the number of police officers grew by just 8% in that time, mental health absences jumped by almost 95%. In 2020, under 10,000 officers were off due to mental health. By 2024, that number had jumped to nearly 19,000. But what about PTSD specifically? Well, a third of the forces I asked didn't provide data. Some admitted they don't track PTSD absences at all. From the information I did get, the number of officers who took time off for PTSD nearly doubled between 2020 and 2024. However, the figure was surprisingly low, just over 2,000 officers for a UK police force of nearly 170,000. One explanation? Officers told me they're often too afraid to report PTSD to bosses, fearing it could damage their careers, so many suffer in silence. To try to understand the reality, I spoke to a serving officer with PTSD who asked to remain anonymous.
I wanted to become a police officer. I think it's a bit cliche to say to make the difference, but to actually give something back. And I come from a family of service. And I wanted to continue that. And the time I joined, those first few years were when violent crime was at its highest in London. And we would see everything. You know, in the course of one day, you could go from a murder to a serious sexual assault, you know, one after the other, with no time to decompress or process what you were dealing with. You would see everything at its most raw. We weren't prepped at all. But I think as a 18 or 19-year-old officer, even more so as a male officer, I think it was the whole male pride or bravado side of it. It was all action, it was all go, go, go. Let's say there'd been a 999 call to a murder, and seeing a young lad who'd been eviscerated, you know, from day one you'll be seeing bad stuff, and then I think after a few years it all builds up and builds up and builds up. And then it gets to the point where, you know, the dam can't hold any more, so it comes flooding out. You know, whether that be, like I said, through alcohol, which unfortunately I did, or whether that be through being short-tempered, which again I have been. Yeah, that's when you really start to notice it. I had a very traumatic personal circumstance, which kind of snowballed, and then that's what led to the PTSD diagnosis. And that's what led directly into excessive drinking. I lost days of my life where I couldn't even tell you what happened in the days. Days on end just gone, completely wiped from my memory. Having to force myself to get out of bed. Sometimes even force myself to get up and use the toilet, not even wanting to get up and have a wee. I was so low, that's when I called the doctor and said, I need help now. You know, that was rock bottom. That was rock bottom. I would say all officers with more than a year or two in the job will have PTSD to some extent. Breaking point can happen at any time. It can look like going back to the station and then becoming angry or upset or crying at anything. I've witnessed it. I've lost a close friend to suicide. In fact, two close friends to suicide in the police. And I think it hit everyone quite hard because there was no build-up, there was no cry for help, there was no nothing. Just, you know, we all got sat down one day and said that this is what happened, and unfortunately he'd killed himself.